The aroma of Margaret Chen's famous pot roast filled the suburban Chicago home, mixing with the crisp October air that drifted through the slightly open kitchen window. Emma Chen sat at the edge of the dining room, her fingers nervously tracing the wood grain of the mahogany table her parents had bought 20 years ago when they first moved to Wilmette. At 32, she found herself back in her childhood home, a place that once meant safety, but now felt like a courtroom where she was perpetually on trial. "Emma, could you at least help your mother set the table?" Her older brother Michael's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, his tailored Brooks Brothers shirt perfectly pressed, a stark contrast to Emma's simple sweater and jeans. Michael had always been the golden child. Harvard MBA, successful investment firm, beautiful wife, 2 kids who were already showing signs of following in their father's overachieving footsteps. Emma rose without a word, moving to the china cabinet to retrieve the plates her mother reserved for Sunday family dinners. Through the archway, she could see her sister-in-law, Jennifer, supervising 8-year-old Tyler and 6-year-old Madison as they worked on their weekend homework at the coffee table. Even on Sundays, the young Chen household maintained its atmosphere of relentless productivity. "I still don't understand why you can't just go back to consulting," her father, Richard Chen, said from his position at the head of the table, not looking up from his Wall Street Journal. "Anderson and Associates would take you back in a heartbeat. Jim Anderson told me so himself at the club last week." Emma's jaw tightened as she placed each plate with deliberate care. "Dad, we've been through this. I'm not going back to consulting." "Then what exactly are you doing?" Richard folded his newspaper with the same precision he'd once used to fold surgical drapes during his 30-year career as a cardiac surgeon. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing nothing while living under our roof." "Richard," Margaret Chen emerged from the kitchen, oven mitts still on her hands, her voice carrying a warning that after 35 years of marriage, her husband recognized but chose to ignore. "What? Are we supposed to pretend this is normal? Our daughter had a 6-figure job at one of the top consulting firms in Chicago, and she threw it away to do what exactly?" Emma felt the familiar knot forming in her stomach. "I'm working on something important." "Important?" Michael scoffed. Helping Jennifer herd their children to the table. "Emma, you've been saying that for 8 months. Mom and Dad have been more than patient, but at some point you need to face reality. Whatever it is you think you're doing, it's not sustainable. Maybe if you told us what this mysterious project is," Jennifer added, her voice deceptively sweet as she adjusted Madison's hair bow, "we could be more supportive." Emma caught her mother's eye, seeing a flicker of sympathy there, but Margaret remained silent as she returned to the kitchen. This was how it always went. Her mother's support came in private moments, never in the face of the family's collective judgment. "I can't discuss the details," Emma said quietly, taking her usual seat at the table, the same chair she'd occupied since she was Madison's age. "I've signed NDAs." "NDAs for what?" Richard's voice rose slightly. "You're unemployed, Emma. Who exactly is having you sign non-disclosure agreements?" "I'm not unemployed. I'm on a special assignment." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Margaret setting the pot roast on the table. Tyler and Madison exchanged glances, sensing the adult tension but not understanding its source. "A special assignment," Michael repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Emma, this is getting ridiculous. You're 32 years old. You're living at home. You have no visible means of income. You disappear at odd hours and come back exhausted. If I didn't know better, I'd think you'd joined some cult." "Michael!" Margaret's sharp reprimand finally came. "What, Mom? Someone has to say it. We're all thinking it." He turned back to Emma. "Look, I get it. Burnout is real. The consulting world is tough. But whatever fantasy you're living, it's time to let it go." Emma's hands clenched beneath the table. If only they knew. If only she could tell them about the 18-hour days she'd been pulling. Not in some air-conditioned office pushing papers, but in secure facilities, developing defense protocols that could save thousands of lives. If only she could explain the weight of the security clearance she carried, the responsibility of knowing things that would terrify most people. "You know what I think?" Jennifer leaned forward, her pediatrician's habit of gentle probing coming through. "I think Emma's depressed. It's nothing to be ashamed of, Em. Lots of people go through it. I could recommend someone—" "I'm not depressed," Emma interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. "Then explain it to us," Richard demanded, carving the roast with unnecessary force. "Because from where we're sitting, you're throwing your life away. Do you know how many strings I had to pull to get you that interview at Anderson? How many favors I called in? I never asked you to do that. No, you just expected everything to be handed to you, like always." Michael accepted the plate his mother passed him. "Some of us had to work for our success." Emma almost laughed at the irony. If Michael knew about the combat training she'd endured, the sleepless nights spent analyzing threat assessments, the weight of decisions that affected national security, he might reconsider his definition of work. But she couldn't say any of that. The Official Secrets Act was clear. Her work with the Department of Defense's Special Civilian Advisory Unit was classified beyond even her family's imagination. "You're being too hard on her," Margaret finally spoke up. But her defense was weak, tired. Emma's always been different. There it was, the word that had followed Emma her entire life. Different when she'd chosen computer science over pre-med. Different when she'd turned down the Harvard Business School acceptance to take a job at a tech startup. Different when she'd left that startup after it was acquired, walking away from millions in stock options because she'd discovered the buyer's ties to foreign intelligence services. Different isn't putting food on the table, Richard said bluntly. Different isn't contributing to society. Your mother and I won't be around forever. Emma, what's your plan then? Maybe she's counting on inheritance, Michael muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Even Tyler looked up from his plate, sensing the cruelty in his father's tone. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me." "Oh, here we go." Michael rolled his eyes. The dramatic exit. "Very mature, Em." "Let her go," Margaret said quietly, but Emma was already walking away, her appetite completely gone. She climbed the stairs to her childhood bedroom, each step echoing with memories of happier times, when her differences were celebrated as precociousness, when her father bragged about her perfect SAT scores, when Michael protected her from schoolyard bullies instead of becoming one himself. Her room remained largely unchanged from her high school days, a shrine to achievements that no longer seemed to matter. Academic awards, debate trophies, a framed acceptance letter to MIT, all remnants of a person her family had once been proud of. Emma sat on her bed, pulling out her secure phone, the one her family didn't know about. No new messages. Radio silence from her handler was expected on Sundays, but part of her hoped for some emergency that would pull her away from this suffocating house. She thought about the work she'd been doing for the past 8 months, the real reason she'd left Anderson and Associates. The call had come through unusual channels. A former MIT professor who'd remembered her doctoral thesis on predictive modeling in asymmetric warfare scenarios. One meeting had led to another. Background checks had been conducted, and before she knew it, she was being sworn in as a civilian advisor to a joint task force so secret it didn't officially exist. Her family saw a failure living at home. The Department of Defense saw one of the most brilliant tactical minds of her generation, someone whose unconventional thinking had already prevented 2 potential terrorist attacks on American soil. But she couldn't tell them that. She couldn't explain that her unemployment was a carefully constructed cover, that her odd hours were spent in SIFs analyzing intelligence that would make their comfortable suburban existence seem like a fragile illusion. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Em?" Her mother's voice was gentle. "I brought you a plate." Emma opened the door to find Margaret holding a tray with food and a glass of wine, a peace offering. "Thanks, Mom." Emma took the tray, setting it on her desk. Margaret entered and sat on the bed, smoothing the comforter with nervous hands. "They don't mean to be so harsh. They're worried about you. They're embarrassed by me." "That's not true." "Mom, please, let's not pretend." Emma sat beside her mother. "I know how this looks. Successful daughter throws away career, moves back home, can't explain what she's doing. I get it." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "You know, when you were little, maybe 4 years old, you used to organize these elaborate games with your toys. Military campaigns, you called them. You'd spend hours setting up these complex scenarios, moving your dolls and action figures around like chess pieces. Your father thought it was strange, wanted me to encourage you to play more. Normally." Emma smiled slightly. "I remember. But I watched you during those games. The concentration on your face, the way you'd think 10 moves ahead. I knew even then that you were meant for something different than what we could understand." Margaret took her daughter's hand. "I still believe that. Even if it means being the family disappointment, you could never disappoint me." Margaret squeezed her hand. "But Emma, this secrecy, it's hard on everyone. Can't you give us something? Anything?" Emma wanted desperately to tell her mother the truth, to explain that she'd spent the last week gaming out scenarios for protecting the nation's power grid from cyber attacks, that her analysis had identified vulnerabilities that were being patched as they spoke, that the Secretary of Defense had personally commended her work. Instead, she said, "I'm doing something that matters, Mom. Something that helps people. I just need you to trust me." Margaret studied her daughter's face. perhaps seeing shadows of the determined 4-year-old who'd once commanded imaginary armies. I do trust you, but I'm not sure how much longer I can hold your father and brother at bay. I know. Emma picked at the pot roast, her stomach still churning from the confrontation. Maybe I should look into getting my own place. With what money? Margaret asked gently. I know you say you're working, but I have some savings. It wasn't a lie. The DoD compensated her well, even if the payments were routed through shell companies and offshore accounts for security reasons. I wanted to be here. It felt safer. Margaret's brow furrowed at the word safer, but before she could probe further, they heard Richard's voice booming from downstairs. Margaret! Emma! You need to see this! The urgency in his tone was different from his earlier anger. Emma and her mother exchanged glances before hurrying downstairs. The family was gathered around the living room television, where a breaking news alert filled the screen. Emma's blood ran cold as she recognized the location, the port of Long Beach, where just 48 hours ago, she'd identified a potential security breach in her analysis. Authorities are crediting an anonymous tip with preventing what could have been the largest terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11, the anchor was saying. We're now going live to Secretary of Defense James Morrison for an official statement. Emma's secure phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it quickly, seeing a message from her handler. Stay calm. Watch. Secretary Morrison appeared on screen, his familiar craggy face serious behind the podium. Emma had met him only once, in a secure facility deep beneath the Pentagon, but his presence still commanded her attention. Good evening. I want to address the American people about the events at the Port of Long Beach and assure you that the threat has been neutralized. Thanks to the exceptional work of our intelligence community and our civilian advisory partners, we were able to intercept and prevent a coordinated attack that would have disrupted supply chains across the nation. Michael scoffed. Civilian advisory partners, probably some think tank taking credit for the real work. Emma bit her tongue, her eyes fixed on Morrison as he continued. While I cannot reveal operational details, I can say that the critical intelligence that allowed us to prevent this attack came from an unconventional source. Sometimes the best insights come from those who think differently, who see patterns others miss. The phone in Emma's pocket buzzed again. This time, it was ringing. Emma, your phone, Margaret said, noticing the sound. It's probably work, Michael said sarcastically. Oh, wait. You don't have work. Emma pulled out the phone, her heart stopping as she saw the caller ID, SecDef Morrison. I need to take this, she said quietly, standing up. Seriously? We're in the middle of... Richard's complaint died as Emma answered the phone and put it on speaker, her hand trembling slightly. Chen here, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. Ms. Chen, Jim Morrison. The secretary's distinctive, gravelly voice filled the room, matching the one still speaking on television with a 30-second delay. I apologize for the theatrical timing, but I understand you're with your family. Every face in the room had gone pale. Michael's mouth hung open. Richard had dropped his newspaper. Even the children had stopped fidgeting. Yes, sir, Emma managed. I wanted to personally thank you for your work on the Long Beach analysis. Your pattern recognition algorithm identified the threat when 12 other systems missed it. You saved countless lives today, Emma. I was just doing my job, Mr. Secretary. Morrison chuckled. Your job? Yes, well, about that. I know the restrictions of your clearance have been challenging for your personal life. I'm calling to inform you that I'm exercising my discretion to partially lift those restrictions. Your family deserves to know that they're living with a genuine American hero. Emma's legs felt weak. Sir, I don't... Ms. Chen, your country owes you a debt. The least I can do is ensure your family knows it. His tone shifted, becoming more formal. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, if you're listening, your daughter has been serving as a special advisor to the Department of Defense for the past 8 months. Her work is classified at the highest levels, but I can tell you that she's one of the most valuable assets in our national security apparatus. The sacrifice she's made, leaving her career and maintaining her cover, represents patriotism of the highest order. The room was so quiet Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Emma identified 17 separate threat vectors that traditional analysis missed. She's prevented 3 potential attacks, saved the government approximately $2 billion in potential damages, and developed predictive models that will protect American lives for years to come. She did all this while enduring personal cost I can only imagine. Emma saw tears streaming down her mother's face. Her father stood frozen, his expression cycling through disbelief, shame, and dawning pride. Michael had sunk into a chair, his face pale. Mr. Secretary. Emma's voice was thick with emotion. This isn't necessary. On the contrary, it's long overdue. Your handler tells me you've been considering moving out of your parents' home due to family pressure. I hope this call helps them understand why you needed to be somewhere secure while undertaking such sensitive work. Yes, sir. Thank you. No, Emma. Thank you. I'll let you get back to your family dinner. Oh, and Ms. Chen? That algorithm you developed last week for supply chain vulnerability assessment. Brilliant work. We're implementing it across all major ports starting Monday. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Enjoy your pot roast. Morrison out. The line went dead. On the television, Secretary Morrison was concluding his press conference, the delay making it surreal as his recorded voice echoed his personal message. Emma slowly lowered the phone, finally meeting her family's eyes. The silence stretched until Madison, with the innocent honesty of a 6-year-old, piped up. "Aunt Emma's a spy?" "Not a spy, sweetheart," Emma said softly. "Just someone who helps keep people safe." "Emma?" Her father's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Is this real?" She nodded, sinking into the nearest chair as 8 months of tension finally released. "I wanted to tell you. Every single day, I wanted to tell you. But I couldn't. The work I do, the things I know, it's so classified that even acknowledging it could put people at risk." "The Department of Defense," Michael said faintly. "You work for the Department of Defense. The actual Secretary of Defense knows your name, calls you personally." "Not just knows her name," Jennifer said, her voice awed. "He called her a hero, said she saved lives." Richard Chen, the man who'd performed thousands of surgeries, who'd held human hearts in his hands, looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "We called you a burden." I said, "Oh God, Emma, the things I said." "You didn't know," Emma said, but her voice cracked on the words. "You couldn't have known." "No." Richard shook his head violently. "No, that's no excuse. I'm your father. I should have trusted you. I should have known my daughter wouldn't just give up, wouldn't just... God, can you forgive me?" Margaret was openly sobbing now, reaching for Emma, who let herself be pulled into her mother's embrace. "My brave girl. My brave, brilliant girl. And you bore it all in silence." "The NDAs? Forget the NDAs," Michael interrupted, his voice thick with self-loathing. "Emma, I've been horrible to you. The things I said, the way I acted, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma felt tears on her own cheeks now, months of pain and isolation finally finding release. "You were worried about me, I understand." "Stop," Richard commanded, his surgeon's authority returning. "Stop making excuses for us. We failed you. Your own family failed you when you were serving your country, when you were saving lives." He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair in a gesture she'd never seen from her proud father. "I'm sorry, Emma, and I'm so proud of you I can't breathe." Tyler, who'd been processing all of this with his 8-year-old mind, suddenly burst out. "My aunt's a hero. Like, a real hero. Wait until I tell everyone at school." "You can't tell anyone," Emma said quickly, but she was smiling through her tears. "It's still mostly secret, okay?" "But Mom said you're like a superhero with a secret identity," Madison added, climbing into Emma's lap. "That's so cool!" The room dissolved into a mix of tears, laughter, and overlapping apologies. Jennifer kept repeating, "I can't believe it," while Michael pulled up every news article about the Port of Long Beach incident on his phone, trying to piece together what his sister had done. As the initial shock wore off, the questions came fast and furious. How had she been recruited? What exactly did she do? How dangerous was it? Emma answered what she could, carefully navigating around classified information, painting a picture of long hours spent in secure facilities, of mathematical models that predicted terrorist behavior, of the weight of knowing that a mistake in her calculations could cost lives. "But why live here?" Richard asked. "Surely they could have provided secure housing." Emma smiled sadly. "They offered. But after everything, after leaving my job and my apartment, I needed to be around family. And even if you thought I was a failure, at least you were here. It made me feel human when the work threatened to consume me." "And we made it worse," Margaret said. "We made you feel unwelcome in your own home. You didn't know." "Stop defending us," Michael said firmly. "We should have trusted you. We should have supported you even without knowing. That's what family does." The pot roast sat forgotten and cold on the dining table as the Chen family rebuilt itself around a new understanding. Stories poured out. Emma shared what she could about her training, the moment she'd realized her algorithm had identified a real threat. The sleepless nights spent refining her models. Her family shared their own guilt and confusion, the discussions they'd had about interventions, their theories about what had gone wrong. "I thought you were having a breakdown," Richard admitted. I even researched treatment facilities. I thought you'd joined a gaming addiction support group and were too embarrassed to tell us, Jennifer confessed, which actually made Emma laugh. I just thought you were being selfish, Michael said quietly. I'm supposed to be your big brother. I'm supposed to protect you. And instead God, Emma, can you ever forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, Emma said, meaning it. You were working with incomplete information. In intelligence work, we call that the fog of war. You made the best decisions you could with what you knew. You're being too generous, Richard said, but I suppose that's what makes you who you are. The daughter who could see patterns in terrorist networks is the same one who found patterns in toy soldiers at age 4. Mom told you about that? She tells me everything. Richard smiled sadly. I should have listened better. As the evening wore on, the family slowly migrated back to the dining room. Margaret insisted on reheating the food, and for the first time in 8 months, Emma ate at the family table without feeling like an unwelcome guest. So what happens now? Michael asked as they shared a dessert Emma had actually been allowed to help serve without criticism. With your work, I mean. Can you talk about it now? A little more than before, Emma said. Secretary Morrison cleared me to acknowledge my role, but the specifics are still classified. I'll probably need to move closer to DC soon. The commute from here to the facilities is getting harder. DC. Margaret's face fell. Of course. That makes sense. Unless... Richard cleared his throat. Emma, I know we have no right to ask this after how we've treated you, but would you consider staying? At least for a little while longer? We've missed 8 months of your life, 8 months of supporting you. I'd like to make up for that if you'll let us. Emma looked around the table at her family's faces. Hopeful, ashamed, proud, loving. I'll think about it. The commute is brutal, but, she smiled, it would be nice to come home to people who actually know what I'm doing, or at least know that I'm doing something. We'll convert the basement, Michael said suddenly. Full office setup, secure lines, whatever you need, it's the least we can do. Michael, that's not necessary. Please, he interrupted. Let me do this. Let us do this. We can't make up for the last 8 months, but we can make sure the next 8 are different. We'll see, Emma said, but she was smiling. As the family cleared the dishes together, another first. As usually, Emma was relegated to this task alone. Her secure phone buzzed again. A message from her handler. Assume the call went well? Morrison was quite insistent. Emma typed back, better than well, thank you. You've earned it, Chen. Enjoy having your life back. But as Emma watched her father teaching Tyler about the importance of national service, as she listened to her mother and Jennifer discussing how to support family members in high-stress classified work, as she felt Michael's protective arm around her shoulders for the first time in years, she realized something profound. She hadn't gotten her life back. She'd gotten something better, a family that finally saw her for who she really was. The burden had lifted, but more importantly, she was no longer carrying it alone. Hey, Em, Michael said quietly as they loaded the dishwasher side by side. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I want you to know, I've never been prouder to be your brother than I am right now. Emma bumped his shoulder with hers, a gesture from their childhood. Thanks, Mike. That means more than you know. Also, he grinned, some of his old humor returning, if you ever need someone to review your algorithms, I did ace multivariate calculus at Harvard. I'll keep that in mind. Emma laughed. Though fair warning, the math I do now makes multivariate calc look like arithmetic. Of course it does. Michael shook his head in wonder. My little sister, the secret genius saving America. Who would have thought? Mom, apparently, Emma said, glancing at their mother, who was showing Madison how to properly dry the good china. She always knew I was meant for something different. Mom's always been smarter than the rest of us, Michael agreed. We should have listened to her. The evening wound down differently than any family dinner in recent memory. Instead of Emma retreating to her room while the others gathered in the living room, she found herself at the center of the conversation, carefully sharing what stories she could while her family hung on every word. Wait, Tyler said suddenly. If Aunt Emma stopped the bad guys at the port, does that mean she's like Black Widow? More like the person who tells Black Widow where the bad guys are, Emma explained. That's even cooler, Tyler exclaimed. You're like the smart one who figures everything out. Out of the mouths of babes, Richard murmured, pride evident in every line of his face. As the clock neared 10, Emma's secure phone rang again. This time she recognized the number as her direct handler. I should take this, she said apologetically. Of course, Richard said. Take all the time you need. This is your home, Emma. Your work is welcome here. Emma stepped into the kitchen for privacy, answering with her standard, Chen here. Emma, it's Davidson. Sorry to call so late, but we've got a situation developing. I know you're with family, but what do you need? Emma was already shifting into work mode, her mind clearing of emotional debris. Remember that pattern you flagged in the Baltimore shipping data? We're seeing similar anomalies in Houston. I hate to ask, but send me the data. I'll review it tonight. You're sure? I know today was significant. Emma glanced through the doorway at her family. Michael was helping his children gather their things while Jennifer collected homework pages. Her parents were standing close together, her father's arm around her mother's waist, both of them looking at Emma with expressions of such profound pride, it took her breath away. I'm sure, Emma said. This is what I do. Roger that, encrypting and sending now. And Emma, good work today. All of it. Thanks. Davidson. She ended the call and returned to the living room where her family was preparing to say their goodbyes. Work? Margaret asked gently. Another situation. I'll need to review some data tonight. Do you need quiet? Richard asked immediately. We can clear out, give you space to work. The offer, so different from the resentment she'd faced for months, nearly brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes. No, it's fine. I'll work in my room, but thank you. We're the ones who should be thanking you, Michael said, gathering Madison into his arms. Every day, apparently. The goodbyes took longer than usual, with extra hugs and whispered apologies. Even Tyler and Madison seemed to understand that something fundamental had shifted, clinging to their aunt with new appreciation. Can we tell our friends at school? Madison asked hopefully. Not yet, sweetheart, Jennifer said. Aunt Emma's job is still mostly secret, like a real superhero, Tyler said with satisfaction. The best kind. After Michael's family left, Emma found herself alone with her parents for the first time since the revelation. The three of them stood in the foyer, none quite sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Emma, Richard began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss. It's okay, Dad. We don't need to… Yes, we do, he interrupted. I need to say this. You've been serving our country, protecting our citizens, and I called you a burden. I said you were wasting your life. I'm ashamed of myself. We both are, Margaret added. We should have trusted you, should have supported you unconditionally. You couldn't have known, Emma repeated, but her father shook his head. That's the point. We should have supported you without knowing. That's what family does. He paused, then added, that's what family will do from now on. Emma hugged them both, feeling 8 months of tension finally, fully release. I love you both, even when it was hard. I never stopped loving you. We love you too, Margaret whispered. Our brilliant, brave daughter. They stood that way for a long moment before Emma's phone buzzed with the incoming encrypted files. Go, Richard said, releasing her. Go save the world. We'll be here when you're done. Emma climbed the stairs to her room, but this time it felt different. Not like a retreat or an escape, but like a soldier returning to their post. She opened her secure laptop and began pulling up the Baltimore data, her mind already shifting into analytical mode. As she worked, she could hear her parents moving around downstairs, the normal sounds of their evening routine. But now she also heard something new, pride in their voices as they spoke quietly to each other, planning how to support their daughter's work, discussing the basement renovation Michael had suggested. The data from Houston was troubling, showing the same subtle patterns she'd identified in Baltimore. Emma began building her analysis, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she constructed models and ran simulations.